Elias Carter thought he was losing his mind. That was the thought that hit him the moment he opened his eyes each morning. Not fear. Not sadness. Noise. Endless, relentless noise. His mind started racing before his feet ever touched the floor. Bills. Mistakes. Conversations from years ago. Imaginary arguments that had never happened. Futures that did not yet exist. By the time the sun rose, Elias was already exhausted, and nothing had even begun. If this sounds familiar, then stay with this story. Because Elias was not weak. He was not lazy. He was not broken. He was simply controlled by a mind he had never been taught to command. This is where his transformation begins. Elias was an ordinary man living an ordinary life in an ordinary American town. He worked hard. He read books. He listened to podcasts. He believed in success. Yet somehow, despite all his effort, his life felt stuck. Every day ended the same way it began. Busy but unfulfilled. Thinking constantly but moving nowhere. One evening, after another long day of mental exhaustion, Elias sat alone at his kitchen table. The house was quiet. No television. No phone. No music. Just silence. And in that silence, something uncomfortable happened. His thoughts got louder. Regrets poured in. Missed chances? Fear of failure. Fear of success. Fear of judgment. His chest tightened. His breathing became shallow. He stood up and paced the room, trying to escape his own mind. That was the night he realized the truth. His problem was not lack of intelligence. It was not lack of opportunity. It was not lack of ambition. His problem was mental clutter. Elias remembered a line he once read in a book by Napoleon Hill. It said that all achievement begins in the mind, but so does all defeat. At the time, he nodded and moved on. That night, those words returned with force. If the mind creates reality, then what kind of reality was Elias creating with constant worry, fear, and noise? The next day, Elias visited an old mentor named Thomas Reed, a retired businessman known in town for his calm presence and sharp wisdom. Thomas had built companies, lost fortunes, rebuilt again, and through it all, remained unshaken. Elias sat across from him and spoke honestly. "My mind never stops," Elias said. "I think all day and all night. I know what I want, but I cannot move. It feels like my thoughts own me." Thomas smiled gently. "That is because they do," he said. Then he leaned forward and spoke words that would change Elias forever. "Most people believe success comes from thinking more. It does not. It comes from thinking clearly. And clarity only comes when the mind learns to empty itself." Elias frowned. "Empty the mind? That sounds impossible." Thomas nodded. "It feels that way because no one teaches it. You were taught to collect information, chase ideas, replay problems. But no one taught you how to release." He explained that the mind is not a storage unit. It is a tool. And like any tool, it must be cleaned after use. A cluttered workshop produces nothing. A cluttered mind does the same. Napoleon Hill taught that definiteness of purpose is the starting point of all achievement. But Thomas added something crucial. "A definite purpose cannot live in a noisy mind," he said. "Purpose requires space." That idea struck Elias deeply. That night, Elias decided to run an experiment. Not with the world. With himself. He sat on the edge of his bed, closed his eyes, and did nothing else. No planning. No analyzing. No judging. Just breathing. At first, it felt unbearable. Thoughts attacked him from every direction. Tomorrow's tasks. Yesterday's failures. Random memories. He wanted to quit after 30 seconds. But he remembered Thomas's words. Do not fight the thoughts. Observe them. So Elias imagined his thoughts as passing cars on a road. He did not chase them. He did not stop them. He simply watched. Something strange happened. For brief moments, the noise softened. In those moments, Elias felt something he had not felt in years. Relief. Space. Stillness. It was small. Fleeting. But it was real. The next morning, Elias woke up and noticed something new. The thoughts were still there, but they felt less powerful. Less commanding. He realized that for the first time, he had not immediately obeyed them. That was the beginning of his mental independence. Over the following days, Elias practiced daily. 5 minutes. Then 10. Then 15. Each time, the same rule applied. Observe. Breathe. Release. That he began asking one simple question whenever a thought appeared. Does this serve my purpose? If the answer was no, he let it go. Napoleon Hill spoke often about the power of organized thought. Elias finally understood what that meant. Organization requires removal. Just as much as selection. As his mind cleared, something else happened. Ideas arrived, not forced ideas. Not anxious plans. Clear insights. Purposeful direction. Decisions became easier. Fear lost its grip. He felt present in conversations. Focused at work. Calm under pressure. The noise that once controlled him was fading. Elias realized that most people live as prisoners of their own thinking. They never question the voice in their head. They assume every thought deserves attention. That belief alone keeps them trapped. Freedom began the moment Elias stopped identifying with every thought. An empty mind did not make him weak. It made him precise. Thomas later told him something Elias would never forget. The strongest mind is the one that can be silent on command. Elias was no longer drowning in mental chaos. He was learning to direct his inner world. And according to Napoleon Hill's philosophy, mastery of the inner world is the foundation of all outer success. This was only the beginning. In the next part of this story, Elias will face resistance. Because when you begin to take control of your mind, old habits fight back. Fear does not surrender easily. Noise does not disappear without a struggle. But Elias has taken the first and most important step. He has reclaimed his mind. And when you reclaim your mind, you reclaim your power. This is part 1 of a journey that will show you how silence creates strength, clarity creates confidence, and control of thought creates destiny. If this story spoke to you, it is because your mind is ready for the same transformation. Subscribe for the next part, share this with someone who needs mental clarity, and leave a comment telling us what thought you are ready to let go of today. Part 2. The silence that revealed Elias. The silence scared Elias more than failure ever had. That was the first truth he had to face. Not the risk of losing money. Not the fear of rejection. Not even the memory of past mistakes. It was the quiet moments, the ones with no distractions, no noise, no escape, that made his chest tighten. The moment the world went still, his mind rushed to fill the space. And that was exactly the problem. If you have ever avoided silence by reaching for your phone, turning on the television, or staying busy for no reason at all, then you already understand Elias. Most people fear stillness because stillness reveals. And revelation requires courage. Elias had begun the practice Thomas taught him. Sitting each day. Breathing. Observing. Letting go. At first, it felt like progress. The noise softened. His thoughts slowed. But then something deeper emerged. The real self, not the confident mask he showed the world. Not the anxious voice that criticized him. But something quieter. Something steady. Something that felt old and wise. Napoleon Hill wrote that every human being possesses a mind capable of connecting to infinite intelligence. Elias never truly understood that idea until now. Infinite intelligence did not shout. It did not demand attention. It whispered. And it could only be heard when the noise faded. One morning, as Elias sat in silence before sunrise, he noticed a strange shift. The thoughts were still there, but they no longer pulled him. They floated past like leaves on a river. For the first time, Elias was not inside his thoughts. He was watching them. In that moment, clarity struck him like a quiet thunder. He was not his worries. He was not his regrets. He was not his fear. He was the awareness behind them. This realization changed everything. Most people live on the surface of their minds. They react. They rush. They chase distractions. They are tossed around by every thought and emotion like a boat without an anchor. Elias had lived that way for years. But now, he was beginning to sink beneath the surface. And beneath the surface, there was power. Thomas explained it to him during one of their walks. A noisy mind lives in reaction, Thomas said. A still mind lives in creation. Napoleon Hill taught that all achievement begins with a burning desire backed by faith. But faith, Elias realized, could not survive in chaos. Faith needed stillness to grow. As Elias continued his practice, resistance appeared. Strong resistance. His mind fought back. It told him he was wasting time. That sitting in silence would not pay the bills. That real success required constant effort. These thoughts felt convincing. But Elias remembered another principle from Hill's teachings. Every habit resists change. The mind protects its familiar patterns, even when those patterns cause pain. This resistance was not a sign of failure. It was proof that change was happening. One evening, after a particularly restless session, Elias almost gave up. His thoughts were louder than ever. Anxiety pressed down on him. Old fears surfaced. Memories he had buried for years demanded attention. He wanted to escape. Instead, he stayed. He breathed. He observed. He allowed. And something remarkable happened. The storm passed. The thoughts lost their grip. The fear softened. And in the quiet that followed, Elias felt a deep sense of peace. Not happiness. Not excitement. Peace. That night, Elias understood a powerful truth. The mind holds on to pain because it was never given space to release it. By emptying his mind, he was not avoiding his problems. He was finally allowing them to leave. Napoleon Hill emphasized the importance of definiteness of purpose. Elias realized that purpose does not come from endless thinking. It comes from alignment. And alignment only happens when the mind is clear enough to listen. Ideas began to arrive again. Not forced. Not frantic. Clear direction. Simple steps. Action without hesitation. He started noticing changes in his daily life. Conversations felt more present. Decisions felt easier. Problems felt smaller. The world had not changed. He had. Elias saw how busyness had once ruled his life. He wore exhaustion like a badge of honor. He believed constant motion meant progress. But now he saw the truth. Busyness was a distraction. Noise was a shield. Silence was the doorway. Most people never walk through that doorway. They fear what they might discover in the quiet. Old pain. Unfinished dreams. Forgotten desires. But Elias learned that facing these things did not destroy him. It freed him. Thomas explained it simply. The cup that is already full cannot receive, he said. Empty your mind, and you decide what fills it. Napoleon Hill believed that thoughts are powerful forces. But only disciplined thought creates success. Undisciplined thought creates confusion. Emptying the mind was not about becoming passive. It was about becoming precise. Elias began to choose his thoughts carefully. He stopped feeding worry. He stopped replaying the past. He stopped arguing with imaginary enemies. He focused on what served his purpose. Slowly, his confidence grew. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind that does not need approval. The kind that comes from self-mastery. One afternoon, while walking alone, Elias had another realization. The world wants your attention scattered. Your energy drained. Your mind so full that you never stop to ask where your life is going. This was not accidental. A distracted mind is easy to control. A still mind is dangerous. Napoleon Hill wrote that the individual who controls his own mind can influence circumstances. Elias now understood how true that was. By mastering his inner world, he was shaping his outer one. This practice was not easy. Some days were peaceful. Others felt like battles. But every time Elias returned to the silence, he strengthened his control. The empty mind was not a destination. It was a discipline. And discipline, Hill taught, is the bridge between desire and achievement. Elias had crossed that bridge. He was no longer living in reaction. He was stepping into creation. And this was only part 2. In the next part, Elias will learn how a clear mind sharpens desire into purpose and transforms intention into decisive action. He will discover how silence fuels confidence, and how faith grows strongest in stillness. If this story resonates with you, it is because your mind is ready for the same shift. Subscribe for the next part, share this with someone who lives in constant mental noise, and comment with one distraction you are ready to release today. Part 3. The decision that changed Elias forever. The moment of decision always arrives quietly. There is no drumroll. No announcement. No signal from the outside world. It comes as a simple inner knowing. A line drawn in the mind. A point where a person either continues as they are or chooses something greater. For Elias Carter, that moment arrived on an ordinary morning. He was sitting alone, coffee untouched, sunlight spilling through the window. His phone buzzed on the table. Messages. News. Noise waiting to be consumed. For years, his hand would have reached for it without thought. This time, it did not. Instead, Elias closed his eyes. That small choice marked a turning point. Not dramatic. Not heroic. But powerful. Napoleon Hill wrote that every great achievement begins with a definite decision. Not a wish. Not a hope. A decision. And Elias had made one. He decided he would no longer be a slave to mental noise. At first, the decision felt fragile. Like a promise whispered rather than declared. But even a whisper, when repeated daily, becomes a command. Elias knew the journey ahead would not be quick. Thomas had warned him. The mind does not surrender overnight, Thomas said. It gives ground inch by inch. But Elias also understood something else now. Every moment of stillness was a victory. Every breath taken in awareness was an act of self-mastery. And self-mastery, Napoleon Hill taught, is the foundation of all lasting success. As the days passed, Elias began to notice how deeply noise had shaped his life. Not just the noise of the world, but the noise inside him. Opinions of others. Old fears. Doubts planted years ago by careless words and failed attempts. These thoughts had once felt like truth. Now, they felt like habits. And habits can be changed. One afternoon, Elias faced a situation that once would have rattled him. A sudden problem at work. Pressure. Conflicting opinions. Tight deadlines. He felt the familiar surge of anxiety rise in his chest. But instead of reacting, he paused. He emptied. 3 slow breaths. Attention on the body. Awareness on the present moment. The noise softened, and clarity emerged. Elias spoke calmly. He made a decision without hesitation. He acted with confidence, not because he knew everything, but because his mind was not clouded. That day, he realized something vital. An empty mind does not remove your edge. It sharpens it. Napoleon Hill often spoke of the power of definiteness. The ability to choose a direction and move toward it without being pulled apart by doubt. Elias finally understood how definiteness is born. It is born in stillness. A cluttered mind second guesses. A clear mind decides. As Elias continued his practice, fears began to surface. Not new fears. Old ones. Buried ones. The kind that hide beneath busyness and distraction. There were moments when grief appeared without warning. Memories he had avoided. Regrets he had never processed. At first, he wanted to escape back into noise. But he remembered Thomas's words. What you avoid controls you. What you face releases you. So Elias stayed. He allowed the emotions to rise. He felt them without labeling them as good or bad. He breathed. He observed. And slowly, they lost their power. This was not weakness. This was courage. Napoleon Hill taught that fear is the greatest enemy of achievement. But fear does not disappear through resistance. It dissolves through understanding. By emptying his mind, Elias was no longer running from fear. He was letting it complete its work and leave. Another fear soon followed. The fear of losing motivation. If I stop pushing, will I stop progressing? The world had taught Elias that success required constant effort. Constant thinking. Constant striving. Silence felt dangerous. But experience taught him otherwise. The more space Elias created, the clearer his purpose became. Goals that once felt scattered now aligned naturally. He was no longer chasing everything. He was choosing what mattered. Motivation did not disappear. It refined itself. Napoleon Hill believed that clarity of purpose creates unstoppable drive. Elias now lived that truth. His energy was no longer wasted on distraction. It was focused, like a river no longer spread thin across a field, but channeled into a powerful current. Then came the deepest fear of all. Who am I without my thoughts? One evening, during a long session of stillness, Elias felt the familiar sense of identity dissolve. No labels. No roles. No stories. Just awareness. At first, panic arose. If I let go completely, will I disappear? But as the panic faded, something remarkable took its place. Presence, not emptiness as loss. Emptiness as freedom. Elias realized that beneath all the noise was something unshakable. A steady awareness that had always been there. Watching. Waiting. This was the self Napoleon Hill hinted at when he spoke of infinite intelligence. Not something outside, but something accessed when the mind becomes quiet enough to receive. Elias was not becoming nothing. He was becoming whole. From that point forward, practice became non-negotiable. Elias treated mental stillness like physical training. Daily. Consistent. Intentional. Each morning, before the world demanded anything from him, he sat. He breathed. He emptied. Throughout the day, he returned to stillness whenever pressure arose. Before meetings. Before decisions. Before difficult conversations. Even 30 seconds made a difference. In the evening, he practiced release. Reviewing the day without judgment. Learning what could be learned. Letting go of the rest. Sleep improved. Energy returned. Focus deepened. The mind that once never rested now knew when to stop. Elias also noticed changes in his relationships. He listened more. Reacted less. People felt heard around him. Conversations softened. Conflicts dissolved more easily. Presence created trust. Trust created influence. This, Elias realized, was real leadership, not control. Not force. But calm clarity. Napoleon Hill wrote that the person who can control their own mind can influence circumstances. Elias saw this principle at work every day. He was no longer pulled by events. He responded to them. Life did not become perfect. But it became manageable and meaningful. Elias understood now that emptying the mind was not a one-time achievement. It was a way of life. The mind would always fill again. With new worries. New challenges. New noise. The master does not avoid this. The master returns to emptiness again and again. This practice brought Elias into the present moment. And in the present moment, life felt vivid. Real. Alive. Most people, Elias saw, are never truly present. Their bodies move through life, but their minds are trapped elsewhere. In regret. In fear. In endless planning, they miss now. But the empty mind lives now, and now is where power exists. By learning to empty his mind, Elias was not retreating from life. He was entering it fully. This was part 3 of his journey. In the next part, Elias will learn how an empty mind strengthens faith, sharpens vision, and transforms quiet clarity into bold action. If this story speaks to you, it is because your own moment of decision is near. Subscribe for the next part, share this with someone overwhelmed by mental noise, and comment with one habit you are ready to release today. Part 4. When silence turned into power. Power does not announce itself. It does not shout. It does not rush. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day you look back and realize you are no longer the same person you once were. That was how Elias Carter discovered his strength. It happened on a day that should have shaken him. Everything that once would have triggered panic appeared at once. Pressure at work. Unexpected conflict. A decision that carried real consequences. In the past, Elias would have overthought every detail. He would have replayed conversations, imagined failure, delayed action until doubt took control. But this time, something was different. His mind was quiet, not empty in a dull way. Empty in a ready way. Napoleon Hill wrote that faith is a state of mind that can be cultivated through disciplined thought. Elias finally understood that faith cannot grow in chaos. Faith needs space. Faith needs stillness. As the tension rose around him, Elias did what now felt natural. He paused. He breathed. He emptied. The noise did not vanish completely, but it no longer commanded him. He felt grounded. Present. Calm, and from that calm, action came easily. He spoke clearly. He chose decisively. He moved forward without hesitation. Later that evening, Elias sat alone and reflected. Not with worry. With curiosity. When did I change? The answer surprised him. He had not changed all at once. He had changed one quiet moment at a time. This was the power Napoleon Hill spoke about when he described the difference between drifting and definiteness. Most people drift through life because their minds are full of noise they never question. Elias had stopped drifting the moment he learned to empty his mind. With stillness came vision. Elias began to see his goals differently. Before, they had felt overwhelming. Too big. Too far away. Now, they felt clear and reachable. He realized that clarity does not come from thinking harder. It comes from thinking less and seeing more. One morning, during his daily practice, Elias noticed something remarkable. His mind was quiet, but his imagination was alive. Ideas formed naturally. Not forced. Not frantic. Napoleon Hill believed imagination was the workshop of the mind. Elias now understood that imagination needs empty space to work. A cluttered mind blocks creativity. A clear mind invites it. New ideas for his career appeared. New solutions to old problems emerged. New confidence took root. This confidence did not come from external success. It came from self-trust. Elias trusted his mind because he knew he could quiet it at will. That trust changed how he moved through the world. People noticed that a colleague commented that Elias seemed different. Calmer. Sharper. More certain. "You don't seem stressed anymore," she said. Elias smiled. He almost laughed. Stress still existed. Pressure still appeared. But it no longer lived inside him. Napoleon Hill taught that circumstances do not control us. Our thoughts about circumstances do. Elias was living proof. As his inner world stabilized, his outer world began to respond. Opportunities appeared. Conversations shifted. Decisions led to better outcomes, not because the world had changed, but because he had. Elias also noticed a deeper shift. His desires were changing. He no longer wanted success to prove himself. He wanted success to express himself. This was a critical distinction. Napoleon Hill warned that desire driven by fear leads to exhaustion. Desire driven by purpose leads to fulfillment. Elias's purpose became clearer each time he emptied his mind. He wanted to build something meaningful. He wanted to lead with calm. He wanted to live deliberately. These desires felt solid. Not desperate. Not rushed. Silence had refined them. But growth always invites a test. One night, Elias received news that shook him emotionally. Old wounds reopened. The familiar urge to escape into distraction returned. For a moment he felt himself slipping. Then he remembered. Emptiness is not avoidance. It is engagement without attachment. He sat. He breathed. He allowed the emotions to rise. He did not analyze them. He did not suppress them. He stayed present. The pain softened. The mind cleared. The moment passed. Elias realized something crucial. The empty mind is not cold. It is compassionate. By creating space, he allowed healing to happen. Without drama. Without resistance. Napoleon Hill spoke of emotional control as a key to success. Elias now understood that emotional control does not mean emotional denial. It means emotional awareness without chaos. As weeks passed, Elias felt more aligned than ever before. His actions matched his values. His thoughts served his purpose. His energy was no longer scattered. Focus became effortless. This focus allowed Elias to work deeply. When he worked fully. When he rested completely. No mental overlap. No constant replay. Life felt cleaner. He also noticed that fear no longer dictated his decisions. Fear still appeared, but it no longer dominated. Napoleon Hill taught that fear is only a state of mind. Elias had changed that state. By emptying his mind daily, he had weakened fear's grip. Faith grew stronger, not blind faith. Grounded faith. Faith in his ability to think clearly. Faith in his ability to act wisely. Faith in his ability to return to stillness whenever life became loud. This faith became Elias's anchor. The empty mind had given him something rare. Inner authority. He no longer needed constant validation. He no longer chased approval. He trusted himself. That trust made him decisive. That decisiveness made him effective. Leadership emerged naturally. Others began seeking his perspective. Not because he talked more. Because he listened better. He responded thoughtfully. He stayed calm when others panicked. This is the leadership Napoleon Hill admired. Quiet strength. Controlled thought. Purposeful action. Elias understood now that success is not built on constant effort alone. It is built on rhythm, action, stillness, action again. The world teaches relentless motion. Mastery teaches balance. By emptying his mind, Elias had found that balance. This was not the end of the journey. It was a deeper beginning. In Part 5, Elias will face the ultimate challenge. maintaining clarity while pursuing bigger goals. He will learn how an empty mind transforms desire into faith and faith into achievement. If this story feels personal, it is because the same path is open to you. Subscribe for the next part, share this with someone seeking clarity, and comment with one moment today where you chose stillness over noise. Part 5. When desire met discipline. Desire is easy to feel. Anyone can want more. More success. More peace. More meaning. Desire often arrives in moments of inspiration, when the mind is calm and the future looks bright. But desire alone has never built anything lasting. Napoleon Hill made this clear. Desire must be backed by discipline, faith, and sustained action. Otherwise, it fades at the first sign of resistance. Elias Carter was about to learn this lesson firsthand. By now, his mind was calmer than it had ever been. The noise that once ruled him had lost its grip. Stillness was no longer foreign. It was familiar, comforting, powerful. But with clarity came a new challenge. Now that Elias could see clearly, he could also see how big his goals truly were. And that realization brought pressure. For the first time in his life, Elias knew what he wanted with certainty. Not vague wishes. Not borrowed dreams. A clear direction that felt aligned with who he was becoming. He wanted to lead. Not just manage. He wanted to build. Not just survive. He wanted to live deliberately. Not reactively. This was definite purpose, the cornerstone of Napoleon Hill's philosophy. But purpose demands commitment. And commitment tests discipline. Elias noticed something subtle happening inside him. As his goals became clearer, his mind tried to fill again. New worries appeared. What if I fail now that I know what I want? What if I lose this peace chasing something bigger? The old habits were clever. They returned wearing new disguises. This time, Elias recognized them. Noise does not always sound like chaos. Sometimes it sounds like caution. Sometimes it sounds like logic. Sometimes it sounds like protection. But clarity allowed Elias to see the truth. Fear was trying to negotiate. One morning, during his quiet practice, Elias felt restless. His mind kept pulling him toward planning, strategizing, and imagining outcomes. He wanted to jump ahead. Instead, he stayed. He emptied, and in that stillness, a deeper understanding surfaced. Stillness is not the opposite of ambition. It is the foundation of it. Napoleon Hill taught that faith is developed through repetition of positive thought combined with emotion. Elias realized that emptying the mind was not removing ambition. It was removing doubt. With doubt gone, faith could grow. Faith in himself. Faith in the process. Faith that action taken from clarity would lead him where he needed to go. But faith without discipline is fragile. Elias needed structure. So he created a simple system. Each morning began with emptiness. Silence. Breath. Awareness. Only after his mind was clear did he turn to his goals. He wrote them down. Not rushed. Not emotional. Just focused. Each action for the day had to pass one question. Does this serve my definite purpose? If the answer was no, it was removed. This single habit transformed his productivity. Napoleon Hill warned against scattered effort. Elias now understood that scattered effort comes from a scattered mind. A clear mind naturally chooses fewer, better actions. Work became more intentional. Time became more valuable. Energy stopped leaking into distractions. But discipline was still tested. Some days, Elias did not want to sit in silence. The novelty had worn off. The practice felt ordinary. Boring even. This was the real test. Discipline is not built when practice feels inspiring. It is built when practice feels unnecessary. Elias remembered something Thomas once told him. The moment you feel like skipping the practice is the moment you need it most. So Elias showed up anyway. He sat. He breathed. He emptied. And each time he did, he strengthened the habit of self-command. Napoleon Hill believed that self-discipline separates wishers from achievers. Elias was no longer wishing. He was training. As weeks passed, Elias noticed something remarkable. The stillness was no longer confined to his practice. It followed him into action. He spoke with confidence in meetings. He took calculated risks without anxiety. He handled setbacks without spiraling. Failure no longer felt personal. Success no longer felt intoxicating. Both were information. This emotional balance gave Elias an edge few possessed. Others reacted emotionally. Elias responded strategically. This is the calm power Napoleon Hill admired in great leaders. But the biggest test was yet to come. An opportunity arose that could accelerate Elias's progress significantly. It also carried risk. Real risk. Old Elias would have panicked. Overthought. Delayed. New Elias emptied his mind. He sat with the decision in silence. He did not force an answer. He allowed space. And in that space, clarity emerged. The answer was yes, not reckless yes. Not emotional yes. A grounded yes. Elias acted. The path forward was not easy. There were long days. Hard conversations. Unexpected obstacles. But through it all, Elias returned to emptiness. Whenever fear arose, he emptied. Whenever doubt appeared, he emptied. Whenever pressure mounted, he emptied. This was his advantage. Napoleon Hill taught that persistence is sustained effort fueled by faith. Elias now embodied this principle. He was persistent, not frantic. Focused, not obsessed. Driven, not desperate. As results began to show, Elias did not celebrate loudly. He reflected quietly. He knew success could refill the mind just as quickly as failure. Pride is noise. Ego is noise. So he stayed disciplined. Stillness before action. Stillness after action. This rhythm kept him grounded. Elias also noticed how his relationships deepened further. People felt safe around him. He did not rush them. He did not interrupt. He listened fully. Presence became his signature. Influence followed naturally. Napoleon Hill wrote that the person who controls himself can influence others. Elias was living proof. By mastering his mind, he had become someone others trusted. By trusting himself, he had become someone others followed. But Elias understood this was not the end. Bigger goals were forming. Greater responsibility awaited. And with growth comes temptation. The temptation to abandon stillness for speed. The temptation to chase more without returning to silence. Elias made a quiet vow, and no matter how far he went, he would return to emptiness. Because emptiness was not the absence of thought. It was the source of right thought. It was the place where fear dissolved. Where faith strengthened. Where discipline renewed itself. This was the bridge between desire and achievement. This was mastery. In part 6, the final part, Elias will face the ultimate test. Sustaining clarity at the height of success and learning how an empty mind creates a legacy that outlives achievement. If this story mirrors your own struggle, it is because you are closer than you think. Subscribe for the final part, share this with someone chasing success but losing peace, and comment with one discipline you are committing to today. Part 6. The quiet legacy. Success does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day you realize your life no longer feels heavy. The anxiety that once ruled you is gone. The noise that once controlled you has lost its voice. And in its place stands something solid, calm, and unshakable. This is where Elias Carter found himself, not at the top of a mountain, not surrounded by applause, but sitting alone one early morning, breathing slowly, mind clear, heart steady. He had achieved what once felt impossible. And yet, this was not the end. Napoleon Hill warned that success carries its own danger. Many people lose themselves not in failure, but in achievement. They become intoxicated by results. They stop practicing the habits that brought them clarity. Their minds fill again, this time with pride, pressure, and the fear of losing what they gained. Elias knew this. That knowledge saved him. The world now saw Elias as successful. His work had impact. His leadership was respected. His decisions carried weight. People listened when he spoke, but Elias did not confuse recognition with mastery. True mastery, he understood, was internal. Every morning, no matter how busy life became, Elias returned to the same simple practice. Silence. Breath. Emptiness. He guarded these moments fiercely, because he knew the truth most never learn. The empty mind is not something you achieve once. It is something you return to again and again. Napoleon Hill wrote that habits determine destiny. Elias had built the most powerful habit of all. The habit of mental stillness. With that habit, he noticed something profound. Success no longer controlled him. Failure no longer frightened him. Both came and went like weather. What remained was clarity. And clarity changed how Elias viewed legacy. Legacy, he realized, is not what you accumulate. It is what you become. He began mentoring others quietly. Not with long speeches. Not with complex theories. But with presence. When people came to him overwhelmed, Elias did not rush to fix them. He listened. Fully. Without distraction. That alone transformed them. Napoleon Hill believed that influence begins with self-control. Elias embodied this principle effortlessly. His calm created calm. His clarity created clarity. People often asked him the secret to his success. Elias always smiled. He never said it was talent. He never said it was luck. He never said it was intelligence. He said it was discipline. The discipline to empty his mind. The discipline to choose stillness over noise. The discipline to act only from clarity. Some understood. Most did not. And that was okay. Elias had once believed that success meant constant movement. Now he understood it meant correct movement. Noise creates motion. Stillness creates direction. This understanding shaped everything he did. When faced with big decisions, Elias did not seek advice immediately. He emptied first. He allowed space for intuition to speak. Napoleon Hill called this the connection to infinite intelligence. Elias did not argue with the term anymore. He experienced it. Insight arrived when the mind was quiet. Solutions appeared when effort stopped. Confidence rose when doubt had no room to live. This was not mystical. It was practical. A clear mind makes better decisions. A calm mind acts faster. A still mind sees farther. Elias also noticed how deeply present he had become in everyday life. Simple moments felt rich. Conversations felt real. Time felt full instead of rushed. Most people spend their lives waiting for peace after success. Elias discovered peace was the path to success. This realization freed him from fear. Fear of losing status. Fear of missing out. Fear of slowing down. He no longer chased more for the sake of more. He chose meaning. Napoleon Hill taught that riches are not only financial. Peace of mind is the greatest wealth. Elias now lived in that wealth daily. One evening, Elias sat with Thomas again. Older now. Slower. But still sharp. You've changed, Thomas said quietly. Elias nodded. I emptied, he replied. Thomas smiled. Then you learned the lesson most never do. They sat in silence for a long time. No words were needed. That silence carried more truth than any conversation Elias had ever known. As Elias walked home that night, he reflected on the journey. The noise. The fear. The resistance. The discipline. The faith. Every step had led here, not to an ending, but to a way of living. Elias understood now that the empty mind was not an escape from life. It was full engagement with it. It allowed him to meet each moment without baggage. Each challenge without panic. Each opportunity without ego. This was freedom, not freedom from responsibility. Freedom from inner chaos. And this freedom could never be taken from him, because it lived within. This is what separates the average from the extraordinary. Not intelligence. Not effort. But mastery of the inner world. Napoleon Hill spent his life studying great achievers. They came from different backgrounds, different industries, different eras, but they shared one trait: they controlled their minds. Elias had joined them, not because he was special, but because he practiced what others ignored: stillness, awareness, discipline. The journey had taken time. It had required courage. It had demanded consistency. But it was worth everything. And now, the same choice stands before you. You do not need to change your life overnight. You do not need to escape to a mountain. You do not need to abandon your responsibilities. You only need to begin. One moment of stillness. One breath of awareness. One decision to reclaim your mind. The empty mind is not weakness. It is the ultimate strength. If this story moved you, it is because you are ready for the same shift. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that build inner power. Share this video with someone drowning in mental noise. And comment below with one thing you are choosing to let go of today. Your journey begins now.